Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.
Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Welcome to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. I'm Jean Till, and on today's show, we'll be visiting with Father Ron Kunkel, Executive Director of the Secretariat of Doctrine and Canonical Affairs at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops.
Thank you, Jean. And, heart's heavy, not so much because maybe certain teams didn't progress into the March Madness as well, but even more on a human level. We were finally remembering Tom Lido, director of the Food Pantry for Catholic Charities there on Hubble Avenue. Just a marvelous man who dropped dead suddenly of a heart attack on Thursday, March 13th, and has been remembered in various quarters, will continue to be a source of gathering for people. But the funeral mass last Saturday at St. John's in Greenfield, what a wonderful turnout and tribute to him and this man who, was very successful in business and a hard-driving guy, riding his Harley and other things as well. And then maybe God kind of got his attention with a major heart attack 10 years ago. And so he left his position with Ruan Penske and ultimately gravitated toward Catholic Charities. And his work there, not only mobilizing volunteers, establishing the relationships so that the supply chain would be there and tapping into new sources, farmers in Madrid and others as well. But he really did, I think, confer that look of love on people, reflecting back to them the dignity that is theirs, even as maybe they were frequenting the food pantry and trying to scratch to put something on the table each day, not only for themselves, but their families. So Tom Lido, may he rest in peace very fondly. Also remembering Deacon Charles. You wanted to say something, Deacon?
Well, I was just going to say the folks at the food pantry have had a tough couple of weeks. I mean, not only with the passing of Tom, who they loved, but then a car went into the front building, and now not only the workers there, but all of the people that came there needing help were impacted as well, because they're not getting their monthly food supplies. They can get some daily things, but it's just a tragedy all the way around.
Yeah, kind of calamity building on itself, but grateful to those who stepped forward and, no commercial paid promotion here, but Rick Ball and the Ball team supplied some of the skilled laborers to kind of secure the space and everything and get it going. So we pray for a quick recovery there, but I'm sure the spirit of Tom Lido will continue to pervade that marvelous setting where the gospel is being lived out. We also remember Deacon Chuck Putbreeze, who died and was remembered and buried from Christ the King Parish on the south side, where he had served as a deacon for many years. What an incredible life story. Working for our nation as one with the Office of Special Investigations for many years during the Cold War, then his own faith, along with his wife, Kay, coming to Iowa, kind of stepping out, and then founding Iowa Catholic Radio, we'll be celebrating next week.
That's 20 years.
Yes, on Wednesday the 2nd, 20 years. Crowned, as many of who listen to this station, Father Mike Schmitz will be visiting, talking about the Eucharist and the moments of encounter that we have, the ways in which then we'll kind of fondly and maybe with a bit of humor look back over those 20 years, the many ways in which the evangelization and the mission is carried out. So what about tickets for that, Jean?
Well, I understand that the diocese has a special deal here going on. If you check out the Catholic Mirror, the adult tickets are...
You got to know somebody here.
You got to know somebody. $50 as long as you have the right code.
Which is the half price.
Which is the half price. And students are $20.
Oh,
so adults 50, students 20, and they need
students
a code.
of any age.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a very exciting.
Do you want to relate those codes to us?
Well, the student one is Newman.
Okay.
No doubt for the Newman Center, that connection. And the adults, I believe it's DM Diocese. That's
well, there
clever.
You go. There
pretty
you go.
Clever.
Yeah, that's not too cryptic, is it?
No.
All right. So it's a great partnership that we've had here on Making It Personal, and this is one of those ways where we can kind of celebrate together and make it possible for others to join us. You mentioned Newman. Thursday the 3rd, the Newman Lecture will take place at St. Catherine of Siena Catholic Student Center. The tradition there, Kelly Markey, founder and executive director of Dorothy's House, helping to equip, heal, and support people who've experienced human trafficking. So many good things, the gospel and all its social implications being lived out here in the diocese.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be visiting with Father Ron Kunkel, Executive Director of the Secretariat of Doctrine and Canonical Affairs at the USCCB. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network. Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. And on today's show, we're visiting with Father Ron Kunkel, Executive Director of the Secretariat of Doctrine and Canonical Affairs at the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops.
Father Kunkel, thank you for your generosity of time with all the many things on your plate in your role on behalf of the bishops and on behalf of the Church in America and the Church Universal as well. So this is something we've been acquaintances of sorts over the year, in part mediated by our common friendship with Dr. Patrizio, my classmate and colleague of yours when you were at Mundelein Seminary as well. I believe this is your silver anniversary of priesthood this year, is it not?
Bishop, that is correct. Yes, I was blessed to be ordained a priest in the Jubilee year of 2000. So yes, I am approaching my silver anniversary of priesthood.
Do you have any special plans to commemorate that, or?
I'll actually have a pretty low-key celebration here in Washington. A number of my family members have already gone on to meet the Lord, and since I'm out of the home diocese currently, the circumstances will create kind of an intimate, less formal celebration here in Washington. So,
okay.
Looking forward to it very much.
Well, again, the Lord is good, kind, and merciful and generous to you and through you to so many others. So that's kind of, you're a priest of the Archdiocese of Chicago.
That is correct.
As my brief times knowing you, you don't have any kind of that Chicago attitude or swagger. You're a great, very humble man, and that. Kind of, would you say a little bit in your role, and even maybe a little bit in the seminary? I don't know, as you felt called to priesthood, is this a little bit more of a hidden life and a kind of God's surprise to you that this is how your vocation is unfolded?
I would say very much so, Bishop. In fact, when I was an undergraduate at the University of Notre Dame, my major was finance and business economics. And so I had every intention of pursuing a career in the business world, and, perhaps the idea of maybe considering going to law school or something like that down the road. But while I was at Notre Dame, I was blessed to encounter a number of very excellent priests, mostly Holy Cross priests, as well as a number of students who were very, very serious about their Catholic faith. So that very much inspired me to begin going to daily Mass, begin praying the Rosary and things of that nature. And so I think the seed was really planted during that time. But when I graduated from the university in 1991, I went to work with a large commercial bank in Chicago. But all during that time,
Gene, a banker. How about that?
I was praying and reflecting on whether the Lord might be calling me to a different way of life. And so after 4 years of working in a secular profession, which I enjoyed very much, I made the decision to apply as a seminarian for the Archdiocese of Chicago, and I entered Mundelein Seminary in the fall of 1995.
Wow, wonderful. And
the important question, though, Cubs or White Sox? Come on, let's get down to it.
I always tell people, a couple of things. First of all, I was born in New Jersey, so we moved to the Chicago area when I was in, I believe, 4th grade. So I did not grow up as a Chicago sports fan. But once we moved to the Chicago area, we were in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And generally, out in the suburbs, you're not as bound by the geography of the city, north side, south side. So I will have to say that I actually became a Chicago White Sox fan. So
I guess this interview's over.
American League, baby, American League.
My apologies for anyone who's offended by that, but I'm more a Sox fan than a Cubs fan.
Only, because here in Des Moines we have the AAA team, the Iowa Cubs,
of course.
For the Cubs. So, but very good. And we could talk more, like Will Buskey, one of our young men, a great family from St. Albert, Council Bluffs, now at Notre Dame, discerning the call to become a Holy Cross brother, priest, and marvelous. And, we'll encourage that, but just as long as men continue to hold the Diocese of Des Moines in the discernment as well. Cardinal George must have sensed something in you, certain competencies and things that he kind of advanced your education and found that niche for you in the seminary faculty.
Bishop, I imagine that was the case. After I entered the seminary, I did 1 year of what was then called pre-theology at Mundelein. And during that first year, Cardinal Bernardine actually invited me to continue my theological education and my priestly formation at the North American College in Rome. So I went over to the NAC, where I would spend the next 5 years. And of course, during that time, Cardinal Bernardine was already becoming quite ill with the cancer that would eventually take his life, and so when then Archbishop George was appointed, coming to Chicago from the Archdiocese of Portland in Oregon, we got to know each other when he would come to Rome, and of course when he came for his pallium that following summer. And he was very interested in my pursuing advanced studies in a certain field. So ultimately, I did a licentiate in sacramental theology at San Anselmo, the Benedictine institution in Rome. And so from that point on, I think there was always a sense that I would likely be involved in teaching and in formation in some way. So indeed, after an initial parish assignment in Skokie at St. Peter's, which is kind of a northern suburb of Chicago. I was then asked by Cardinal George to go to Holy Name Cathedral. I was at Holy Name Cathedral for about 4 years. During that time, I served as the director of liturgy there. And then I moved to Mundelein to be on the faculty there. And so I spent the next 16 years at Mundelein Seminary.
Wow, tremendous. So your spiritual fatherhood kind of realized through these men you've kind of accompanied and formed, hopefully the great fruit that you see in them and the pride that you can take in that. Ultimately, the invitation or the request to become executive director of the Secretariat of Doctrine and Canonical Affairs, succeeding Father Michael Fuller, another, I don't know, do we say Illinoisan or whatever, from Rockford? Yeah. Not Illini, that's a particular brand of from the state of Illinois. But so, again, good Midwestern influence on the conference. What does your role entail, and how, as a theologian, is this a kind of fulfillment of that particular charism that you bring? And then talk about, as we maybe, to the relationship between theologians and bishops.
Well, Bishop, thank you for that excellent question. There's quite a bit to unpack there, but I would say
vintage Joensen.
In terms of the first part of your question, on a day-to-day basis, certainly I very much try to provide theological input, guidance, share my wisdom with all of my fellow staff members here, so persons who work in all of the different departments and offices of the conference. So whether that's pro-life, Catholic education, advising our Office of General Counsel on certain matters. So, for instance, if the conference is considering filing a friend of the court brief in a federal court, or perhaps even with the United States Supreme Court, in the midst of that legal document, there's going to be an articulation of, well, why is the Catholic Church, why are the Catholic bishops interested in this case, in this issue? And so there'll be at least a section which will deal with the teaching of the Church, with Catholic doctrine. And so I'll be asked to weigh in on that and to contribute to drafting that, so that articulation hopefully is as accurate and as effective as it can be. So on a day-to-day basis, I use my theological background in terms of advising my colleagues here. I also am in the position where oftentimes I'm considered a resource by other dioceses. So, for example, just this morning, just not long before we got on the phone here together, I fielded an email from the Vicar General of another Midwestern diocese, Great Lakes area, who in fact is a former student of mine at Mundelein Seminary. And he was posing an issue regarding the validity of a baptism. And so I have not had the chance to respond to him yet, but I'm going to basically explain the reason why I think, the case he described is either problematic or not so problematic. So that's the sort of thing I do on a day-to-day basis.
So a lot of prudential application of the Church's teaching.
Most definitely.
Kind of a casuistry in the best of senses, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Bishop, I'll say, interestingly, I think it's important. Hopefully it's beneficial to your listeners to have an appreciation that when you hear the name of my office, of this office, Doctrine and Canonical Affairs, it can sound very technical, very abstract. But of course, the notion is that church law and the teaching of the church is always directed in a pastoral way. It's always meant to be applied to real situations, real people, for hopefully the promotion of the mission of the church and the proclamation of the gospel, bringing people to know and love the Lord Jesus more deeply. And I'm also struck by the fact that in a previous time period, I'm not sure how many years it's been, but this used to be actually called the Office of Doctrine and Pastoral Practice. So indeed, it does have that very practical dimension of how do you apply the law and the doctrine of the church to particular questions and to particular real life circumstances.
That's very instructive. I hear an evangelical dimension to what you're about, and not just a kind of censor laborum, where you're like trying to decide what things meet the orthodoxy test on things. Right. Yeah,
it does involve that for sure, but hopefully goes beyond in terms of that more evangelical dimension, as you said.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to this relationship between bishops and theologians, but one of the major projects, and privileged now to, as I had my first meeting a few weeks ago, I was really thinking, this is a great privilege to sit at this table, and particularly we were focused on the revision of the ethical and religious directives for healthcare, which has been something that's had very few actual revisions over the past decades. But the level of conversation among the bishops and the engagement with you and canonical and theological consultants was very high, but not esoteric in any way. It had that kind of real dimension there. So talk to me about the ethical and religious directives for our listeners. What's going on there?
Mm-hmm.
So the ethical and religious directives for Catholic healthcare services was last revised, I believe it was now 7 years ago, 2018 I think was the last revision. But this is a document which is crafted by the Committee on Doctrine, which, as you noted, you are now a member of. And so the Committee on Doctrine prepares these directives, which then have to be voted upon and approved by 2/3 of the body of bishops here in the United States. So it's a very important level of teaching on the part of the bishops of the U.S. And I think that the real significance in these directives is that Catholic healthcare is such an important part of the Church's ministry, especially here in the United States. So many Catholic healthcare systems spread out throughout the 50 states. And so the ethical and religious directives essentially provide a theological presentation of what the Church's vision is of healthcare in general, and then it addresses specific moral and ethical issues. So everything from abortion and IVF to euthanasia, care for people that are seriously ill and dying, but also provides directives in terms of, well, in a Catholic hospital, here are the kinds of spiritual and sacramental services that should be provided in a Catholic institution. So they're very important directives. We work very closely with our collaborating partners at the Catholic Health Association and the National Catholic Bioethics Center, groups like that, to really consult and dig into these sometimes very, very challenging and very difficult moral issues so that we can teach with clarity and give good guidance to the healthcare practitioners that work in a Catholic institution.
That was marvelously exposed, eminently clear. Maybe as we come back after the break, we could talk about one or two of those particular areas and also some other things that have been cooking with doctrine.
We will be back shortly and visit more with Father Ron Kunkel, the Executive Director of the Secretariat of Doctrine and Canonical Affairs at the USCCB. There is a wealth of information about the U.S. Conference, the Catholic bishops, on their website. Go online to usccb.org. You're listening to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network. Welcome back to Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen.
So we're talking the ethical and religious directives. Again, we look to promulgate those in the Diocese of Des Moines as particular law, pending the approval that Father Kunkel, maybe Bishop someday, you never know, wouldn't wish that on you, but anyway, Father Kunkel, this November, that would be the anticipated plan for this, that then they could be promulgated, as they say, in the next part of next year. Topics such as gender dysphoria, palliative care, are among those that have received attention in this. Shall we talk about what's happening with gender dysphoria palliative care and in light of the doctrinal note that was also released last year?
Yeah, Bishop, I think what's very important to appreciate is that the previous ERDs, as well as important authoritative resources like the Catechism, were really silent on the issue of what were morally legitimate interventions for people experiencing gender incongruence or gender dysphoria. And so what the doctrinal note, which was produced by the Committee on Doctrine a couple of years ago, articulated is that in caring for people who have this particular form of suffering in their lives, interventions, whether chemical or surgical, which are intended to facilitate what is referred to as gender transition, is not morally acceptable from a Catholic standpoint in terms of our moral tradition, our anthropology, and so forth. So the notion would be that presumably the forthcoming edition of the ERDs would reflect that teaching. That, of course, was not so much an issue even 10 or 20 years ago, but it's become much more culturally significant. And so the feeling of the bishops is that it's long overdue that it now be addressed.
Okay, very concise summary there. Thank you. And then palliative care is a movement that's really flourished in the last 10 to 20 years. Also did not receive as much attention in the previous versions. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And the then Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith a few years ago issued a document, Samaritanis Bonus, which dealt significantly with this topic of palliative care and of ensuring that people who are seriously ill, who are in fact are dying, who are terminal, are provided all of the full range of spiritual and medical resources to cope with that particular phase and to help people prepare, to move on to that next stage of life of meeting the Lord. And certainly a greater emphasis on management of pain, etc., which really having a robust Catholic appreciation of palliative care is something which can be very much an antidote to the movement to have physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia and things of that nature. So very, very important area.
Thank you. Samaritanus bonus, the Good Samaritan. So very good. This is kind of a lightning round, and we're down almost to our last minute here, but just the sense that, this formerly Congregation now Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, continues to issue teachings trying to address relevant areas that are unfolding in our societies. Supernatural phenomenon are one of those. And then also more recently in the document Antiqua et Nova, Old and New, AI receives some further attention as well. And
Indeed.
Yeah. And so how do you see the Doctrine Committee taking those up? Is it the mission of the committee to kind of extend the teaching, to shine a light on it, to communicate it to the larger church?
I would say, Bishop, it's all of the above. And sometimes we receive a request from the Holy See to amplify certain aspects of their teaching in order to better communicate it to the people here who are Catholics in the United States. So with regard to the supernatural phenomenon, it's a question of providing resources that educate bishops and priests, particularly on how to address claims that might be made that somebody has experienced a miraculous healing, or that there is a place in which an apparition is occurring, or someone purports to be experiencing locutions or things of that nature. And so to provide guidance in terms of, well, as a bishop, how do you respond to that when that call or that letter arrives at your office?
So we'll look for assistance in that regard. And unfortunately, Father Kunkel, we've reached that point here. I sense we're going to be bringing you back at some point in the near future.
I'd like that.
So thank you so much.
Well, I'd be happy to do so, Bishop. It's been a pleasure.
This has been another edition of Making It Personal with Bishop Joensen. Thank you to our guest and to all of our listeners around Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin. You're listening to the Iowa Catholic Radio Network and the Spirit Catholic Radio Network.
You can hear Making It Personal with Bishop William Joensen every week on Iowa Catholic Radio and iowacatholicradio.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and Making It Personal is provided by Sarah Vocations Ministry. Learn more at joinserra.org.